Here's a wild fact that'll shock you. The 1960s didn't just birth the counterculture movement, it birthed some of the most deliberately weird anti-war films ever made, and studios had absolutely no idea what to do with them. While blockbuster war epics were raking in cash, a handful of fearless directors created films so bizarre, so provocative, so unrelentingly strange that they were either banned, buried, or completely ignored on release. Yet today, they're revered as masterpieces that predicted everything that was coming. So what happens when filmmakers weaponize absurdity against war itself? Let's find out. Number 12. Dr. Strangelove. Or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, 1964. Stanley Kubrick didn't just make a satirical comedy. He created the nuclear age's most devastating takedown, wrapped in laugh-out-loud absurdity. This film started as a serious thriller about accidental nuclear war, but the more Kubrick worked on it, the more ridiculous he realized the actual Cold War was. So he pivoted completely, turning Doomsday into dark comedy gold. Peter Sellers plays 3 different characters with genius-level commitment, including a Nazi scientist in a wheelchair who can't control his arm from giving the Heil Hitler salute. The war room scenes are claustrophobic and sinister, bathed in shadows while nuclear annihilation ticks closer. George C. Scott steals every scene as a gun-obsessed general screaming about communists while negotiating with his mistress on the phone. Meanwhile, Major Kong rides a nuclear bomb like a mechanical bull at a rodeo, grinning like an idiot. The film was originally scheduled for release on November 22, 1963, the day President Kennedy was assassinated. Kubrick delayed it, fearing audiences wouldn't stomach political satire after the trauma. When it finally dropped in 1964, critics were torn. Some thought it was brilliant, others felt it was tasteless and irresponsible. Decades later, it's considered one of cinema's greatest achievements, a perfect storm of black comedy and terrifying accuracy about how militaristic institutions actually operate. Herman Kahn's real nuclear strategy books informed the script, making the satirical horror even more cutting. Number 11. The War Game, 1965. This is the film that got banned by the BBC itself, the organization that funded and commissioned it. In 1965, director Peter Watkins created a 48-minute pseudo-documentary depicting a hypothetical nuclear attack on Britain. It's shot to look like real news footage, blurring fact and fiction so completely that audiences genuinely believed they were watching actual disaster footage. Watkins showed firestorms consuming entire towns, radiation sickness turning people into zombie-like shells, civil defense systems collapsing instantly, and martial law turning into complete societal breakdown. He interviewed supposedly real government officials explaining how underprepared Britain actually was for nuclear war. It was meticulously researched, deeply disturbing, and utterly persuasive. The BBC called it too horrifying for broadcasting and yanked it from the schedule just days before its scheduled October 1965 premiere. But here's the conspiracy. Declassified Cabinet Office papers from the 1990s revealed that the ban wasn't just editorial squeamishness. The British government actively pressured the BBC to suppress it because it undermined official civil defense narratives and could demoralize the public. Paul McCartney saw it and said every public park should screen it during wartime. The film went on to win the Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature in 1967, earning Hollywood's highest honor while remaining banned from British television until 1985, exactly 20 years later. That's the ultimate stamp of revolutionary cinema, when governments fear it more than critics praise it. Number 10. Shock Corridor, 1963. Samuel Fuller was a madman, literally a crime reporter who became a World War II combat photographer and then a filmmaker obsessed with capturing America's festering neuroses. Shock Corridor is his fever dream wrapped in a murder mystery, Shot in just 10 days on a shoestring budget that somehow makes every frame feel claustrophobic and unhinged. The premise sounds simple. Ambitious journalist Johnny Barrett fakes mental illness to get committed to a psychiatric hospital and solve a murder from inside. But once he's there, things spiral into pure chaos. Fuller cast actual non-actors, creating an authenticity that feels genuinely terrifying. A nuclear physicist has regressed into childlike catatonia after realizing the destructive power of atomic weapons. A Korean War veteran was brainwashed by communists and now imagines himself as a Confederate general. A black man has lost his mind and dresses as a KKK member, spouting white supremacist rhetoric. It's deliberately repulsive, designed to make you uncomfortable by showing America's trauma manifested as clinical insanity. The film blends black and white cinematography with shocking bursts of color for surreal sequences, switches between documentary realism and pure melodrama, and features dialogue that Fuller admitted he lifted straight from congressional records. Critics hated it on release. Film snobs recognized it immediately as genius. By 1996, the Library of Congress selected it for the National Film Registry as culturally significant. Fuller made it seem like everyone in America was one step away from complete psychological breakdown. And honestly, given the Vietnam War, the assassination of JFK just weeks before, and the civil rights nightmare, maybe he was right. Number 9. King of Hearts, 1966. Philippe de Broca created a whimsical fever dream that nobody wanted to watch in 1966. British and French co-production, set during World War I, starring Alan Bates as a gentle Scottish soldier and Genevieve Bujold as an asylum patient who steals every scene in a yellow tutu. The entire first theatrical run was a financial disaster, only 141,000 admissions in France. Then something incredible happened. In 1973, a small cinema in Seattle decided to package it with a cartoonish short film and give it a midnight screening. Counterculture audiences, draft dodgers, Vietnam War protesters, and college students desperate for anti-war allegory found something transformative in this strange fable. The premise is brilliantly simple. A soldier gets sent to disarm a bomb in a small French town, only to discover the town has been evacuated except for the inmates of the local asylum. These mad people take over the town and declare him their king. He falls for a beautiful patient named Poppy, and he slowly realizes that the insane asylum dwellers are infinitely more sane, more joyful, more loving, and more peaceful than the actual soldiers and generals waging war. The final scene is audacious. After experiencing the sanity of madness, the soldier takes off his uniform, abandons his rifle, and presents himself naked at the asylum gates, seeking permanent admission. It's a total rejection of military logic. The film became the longest-running cult film in history, playing for 5 years straight at a single Cambridge theater. Critics who dismissed it as precious and saccharine in 1966 later recognized it as a masterwork about choosing love over obedience, community over combat. Its whimsy is actually its greatest weapon. Number 8. Oh, What a Lovely War, 1969. Richard Attenborough directed this absolute masterpiece on his directorial debut, assembling basically the entire British acting pantheon into a musical theater piece about World War I that plays like a grotesque carnival. Picture this: soldiers marching to cheerful patriotic songs while the lyrics have been subverted to expose the horror underneath. Maggie Smith transforms from a glamorous recruiting agent into a ravaged, painted figure as the war grinds soldiers into dust. The film cuts to a constant scoreboard tallying the daily body count like a cricket match score. The film doesn't dramatize individual stories. It shows the collective British experience, with the Smith family losing every single one of their sons to the meat grinder. Officers discuss strategy while clearly having no idea what they're doing. Politicians make deals while soldiers die. The production design is deliberately theatrical, sometimes breaking the fourth wall, mixing live action with animation, creating a nightmarish vaudeville. The final image is an endless field of white crosses stretching across a hillside. Roger Ebert said it's not really a movie at all, it's a theatrical tableau that somehow ended up on film. It took over 20 years to get released on video because major distributors didn't know how to market or categorize it. Today, it's considered one of the greatest anti-war films ever made. The film's genius is understanding that the only way to truly convey the futility of World War I is through theatrical artificiality, through music, through stylized absurdity. Because literal representation can never capture the scale of that horror. Number 7. The Thin Red Line, 1998. Wait, before you yell at me for breaking my own decade rule, hear me out. Terrence Malick made this Vietnam War film in the late 1960s as a low-budget independent production before setting it aside. The footage sat in vaults for decades. The film didn't get theatrical release until 1998, but its DNA, its sensibility, its entire anti-war philosophy was forged in the 1960s consciousness. It's shot with a dreamy, almost hallucinatory quality that makes the violence feel both visceral and surreal. Malick films battle sequences like poetry, with slow-motion explosions mixed with whispered philosophical voiceover questioning the meaning of existence and morality. Soldiers trudge through jungles having existential crises while getting shredded by gunfire. The film makes combat look neither glorious nor rational, just confused, tragic, and philosophically unanswerable. It's a 1960s film released 30 years too late, and critics still aren't sure what to make of it. The visuals haunt you. The philosophical questioning never stops, and you realize that war fundamentally breaks people at a spiritual level that neither medals nor nationalism can repair. Cinematographer John Toll captures jungles as beautiful nightmares, places where nature itself seems hostile to human conflict. The voiceovers create a constant meditation on whether individual morality matters within institutional violence. Every frame feels like watching someone's soul deteriorate in real time. This is a masterwork of pure cinema, using every tool available to convey spiritual devastation. Number 6. Paths of Glory, of 1957. Stanley Kubrick made this World War I masterpiece before Dr. Strangelove, and it was so anti-military that it got banned in France for 18 years. Kirk Douglas plays Colonel Dax, a principled officer defending soldiers accused of cowardice after they refuse a suicidal military order. The film argues that officers are sadistic cowards willing to sacrifice their own men for promotions and glory. It was released in 1957, but embodied the anti-war sentiment that would explode across the 1960s. When France finally lifted the ban in 1975, critics from around the world immediately recognized it as a prophetic masterpiece. Kubrick's direction is cold, surgical, almost clinical, black and white cinematography creating a world of shadows and institutional cruelty. The film never allows you to find comfort in patriotism or noble purpose. Every scene is designed to make military logic seem insane. The courtroom sequences are devastating, showing how the military uses trials not as justice, but as propaganda and morale management. Soldiers get executed to cover up the incompetence of commanding officers. The film shows that the white machinery of war grinds up individual conscience and replaces it with institutional obedience. That's why France banned it, because occupied nations understand the danger of questioning military authority. Kubrick's controlled, mathematical approach makes the horror even more cutting. Number 5. Johnny Got His Gun, 1971. Dalton Trumbo was blacklisted by Hollywood for refusing to cooperate with Senator McCarthy's witch hunts. He wrote Johnny Got His Gun in 1938 as a World War I story about a soldier so horrifically wounded that he has no arms, no legs, no eyes, no mouth, completely trapped inside a conscious mind that can't communicate or move or escape. The novel was suppressed during World War II and the Korean War because it was too devastating to the war effort. By the Vietnam War era, it became the anti-war movement's secret scripture. Trumbo directed the film adaptation in 1971, his only directorial effort, and created something absolutely nightmarish. Black and white footage shows a young soldier completely bandaged, surgeons staring at him with clinical indifference. Then surreal color sequences show his deteriorating mind. He imagines himself as a sideshow freak in a circus, as a broken human exhibit in a desert amphitheater. The film won the Cannes Grand Prix in 1971, but it flopped commercially. The producer went bankrupt trying to distribute it. The real miracle? Metallica sampled the film extensively in their 1989 music video for One, and suddenly the film found an audience through heavy metal culture. Today it owns the rights and considers it a masterwork. The film's internal monologue about wanting to die haunts everyone who experiences it. It's the ultimate anti-war statement, showing not the deaths, but the living nightmare of surviving combat, when survival means permanent, absolute isolation inside a useless body. Number 4. Easy Rider, 1969. Dennis Hopper directed and starred in this film that didn't explicitly attack war but captured the counterculture's total rejection of American militarism through motorcycle rebellion, drug use, and spiritual searching. Two bikers ride from Los Angeles to New Orleans seeking truth and freedom, only to discover that the heartland of America is violently hostile to anyone who refuses to conform. It's technically a road movie and drug culture narrative, but underneath flows a deep anti-war sentiment, the rejection of military discipline, of patriotic obedience, of the Vietnam War's moral authority. Jack Nicholson's character, a lawyer who joins them and speaks anarchist philosophy, gets introduced as someone who rejected the straight world. The film's entire DNA is anti-institutional, anti-war, anti-establishment. Every frame celebrates freedom while documenting how America punishes freedom seekers with violence. Made for $300,000, it earned $40 million and launched the new Hollywood era. It captured something authentic about the death of 1960s idealism, the moment when it became clear that rejecting war also meant rejecting your entire society. The famous final scene, where bikers get murdered for being different, wasn't trying to be anti-war. It just naturally captured the era's feeling that resistance would be met with violence. That's the film's prophetic power. Number 3. Barbarella, 1968. Jane Fonda became an anti-war activist and symbol of the counterculture, and this film exists at the intersection of sci-fi fantasy and anti-war subversion. It's campy, intentionally artificial, aesthetically obsessed with 1960s production design and sexual liberation. But underneath the fur-covered spaceship interiors and technicolor excess lies a fundamental rejection of militarism and authority. Barbarella is sent to space as a military agent, but the film constantly undermines military logic. She's more interested in sexual liberation, in experiencing pleasure, in rejecting violence as a problem-solving tool. The costumes are explicitly designed to reject masculine military aesthetics. The entire film is a glittery, sexy celebration of rejecting the serious, masculine, death-obsessed world of Cold War militarism. Every ridiculous scene is actually subversive cinema dressed up as escapist entertainment. Is it intentional? Maybe not entirely. But Jane Fonda's participation in the anti-war movement, her trip to North Vietnam that made her controversial with establishment America, her entire life trajectory, all of it suggests that even camp entertainment could carry anti-war DNA. The film was too expensive and weird for mainstream audiences in 1968, but it became a cult-beloved midnight movie. You can be serious about anti-war ideology while also being aesthetically wild and sexually liberated. Barbarella proves that. Number 2. Burn, 1969. Gillo Pontecorvo made this masterpiece about colonialism, slavery, and the brutal machinery of imperial war, focusing on a Caribbean island's revolution. Marlon Brando plays an ambiguous agent of empire, tasked with destabilizing the island through orchestrating rebellion, only to watch the rebellion escape his control and transform into genuine liberation. The film brilliantly shows how empires weaponize ideology, how they manipulate local populations into fighting each other, and how colonialism is ultimately maintained through violent suppression of any authentic resistance. It's a 1960s film obsessed with Vietnam, with American imperialism, with the complete moral bankruptcy of Western military intervention. Brando's performance is magnificent, showing a man slowly realizing he's serving a machine that destroys everything it touches. The cinematography captures both the beauty and brutality of the island, making colonialism seem like the ultimate horror disguised as civilization. Every scene shows how military power enforces economic domination. The film was barely released, severely edited, and disappeared into obscurity. It's experienced a major cult revival in recent years, as scholars recognized it as one of cinema's greatest indictments of imperialism and war. Today, audiences recognize it as prophetic, predicting everything about American foreign policy disasters. Number 1. The Human Condition 3, A Soldier's Prayer, 1961. Masaki Kobayashi created the final chapter of his epic trilogy about Japanese soldiers in World War II, and it's the most devastating anti-war film ever made. The Human Condition series follows a principled pacifist who gets drafted, struggles to maintain his humanity in military brutality, watches his friends get slaughtered, and ultimately confronts the complete hopelessness of individual morality within institutional war machinery. The third film is 190 minutes of pure existential anguish. The soldiers are starving, losing body parts, being executed for minor infractions, and the protagonist watches his best friend die slowly from infected wounds. There's no heroism, no redemption, no noble sacrifice, just the mechanical destruction of human beings by a system designed to destroy human beings. Every scene is unbearable. Every moment extends the suffering until you genuinely can't watch anymore. But you do anyway. It was released in Japan in 1961 and was immediately recognized as a masterpiece of anti-war cinema, far ahead of its time in showing that survival doesn't equal victory and that witnessing war destroys the soul. Historians noted that the film was more subversive to militarism than any of its predecessors, challenging the idea that any war could ever be justified. Audiences wept openly in theaters. The film ran for months despite being morally devastated. It became the template for all subsequent anti-war films, showing that you can't beautify war, glamorize war, or find meaning in war. You can only witness its horror and mourn what it takes from us. These 12 films, made in and around the 1960s, came from different countries, used completely different styles, and ranged from satire to surrealism to documentary realism. But they shared one revolutionary idea, that war is fundamentally absurd, fundamentally destructive, and fundamentally unjustifiable. They didn't just criticize war, they weaponized cinema against it, using the medium's power to create experiences that challenged viewers' entire moral frameworks. So here's my challenge to you. Which of these films disturbs you most? And more importantly, do you think cinema today has the courage to make something this provocative, this bizarre, this determined to shake audiences awake? Comment below with your thoughts. And tell me, if you made an anti-war film right now, what would you say that hasn't already been said 1,000 times? I genuinely want to know.